QRM is used to manage the flows of knowledge during development so that we are able to get there more efficiently and with a greater cost effectiveness. Enjoying these benefits does, however, require an investment in this systematic approach to knowledge management starting very early in development. Information flow begins when the business identifies unmet customer needs and defines a new product to meet those needs. Regulators, as advocates for the safety of the customer, dictate many of the product requirements and manufacturing practices. The business uses this understanding of customer requirements along with its own business goals to design the product and its manufacture. These three sources, customer, business, and regulator, define the requirements of the product. It is up to the manufacturer to ensure that the capabilities of the facility are sufficient to run the process and that the process creates a product fulfilling requirements. The arrows highlight that the flow of requirements is fed forward from those responsible for defining the product, and the information about the capabilities of meeting those requirements is fed back from those developing the process. During development, as the limits of process capabilities become known, for example, after the selection of a CMO, or if requirements change, for example, after clinical trials, rapid and effective communication is needed to enable the necessary changes to the process. Quality risk management facilitates this communication, and its absence greatly increases the risks that the project will fail to meet safety or financial targets. To build this knowledge management system and take control over process and product risks during the product life cycle, it is important to understand the elements of QRM, specifically when they are in focus and the type and quantity of knowledge that they generate. To ensure this happens, an organization must have both a common understanding of how to use these elements and why they are important in daily work. Let us now look at each element of QRM shown here. We will begin by defining the elements listed on the left and then follow with a brief example of how they are used in development. The TPP is the Target Product Profile, and it is a complete list of the product requirements as defined by the business. Some examples are listed here. QTPP, the Quality Target Product Profile, is often a large subset of the product requirements, the TPP, and is composed of the product requirements directly related to product quality. A common example is the compendial requirements for parenteral drugs. Some additional examples are shown here. CQA, Critical Quality Attributes. These are the characteristics of the product or its intermediates. Shown here in this table, you can see some product and intermediate specifications. CMA are the critical material attributes. These are the critical raw materials used in production whose variability will directly impact quality of the product. In the table under the CMA, you can see some examples. During production, CMA and CQA must be controlled within appropriate limits, ranges, or distributions to ensure the desired product quality is achieved. It is the job of development to define and justify the designation of critical as well as the limits so that the targets for the validated state are clear. In a manufacturing process, CPP, critical process parameters, are the equipment parameters in each unit operation whose variation during production will have a critical impact on CQA and must be controlled at the critical control points to ensure the CQA targets are achieved. A USP bioreactor is obviously a critical unit operation, but to determine the critical parameters and their control points, we must drill down into a detailed process mapping for each step in the unit operation and perform experiments that identify the critical parameters, their interactions, and how they can best be controlled in order to ensure consistent, high-quality output. When development can present a clear list of CPPs and CCPs and the data to justify their settings, we then have the knowledge needed to facilitate an efficient tech transfer and a successful process validation. The process control strategy is born from this process knowledge. In the process control strategy, the critical points, the SOPs, the worker training, and the monitoring program necessary to achieve the product specifications are defined. These then become the prerequisites for process validation. We then normally run a process FMEA to understand the risks of moving the process to the facility. In the process FMEA, we ask the question about the ability of the facility, its equipment, and personnel to perform the process as designed. The assumption is that the process as designed will produce product according to predefined targets, However, operational constraints and limitations in equipment design may not allow the process to be run exactly as designed, and therefore changes to the facility may be necessary. The process FMEA is probably the most common tool used in bioprocess risk management. It is very formal and requires a lot of process understanding already to be in place to deliver its benefits. The FMEA is also used in process design. The design FMEA is used when we are considering alternatives in, for example, unit operation selection, for example, centrifugation versus filtration. The FMEA is also used as a project management tool to identify and control risks to the project. As mentioned, the process FMEA is a formal tool and it gives a numerical score to the level of risk, the RPN score. The RPN score in a quality risk assessment is a function of severity of harm, probability of occurrence, and detectability, wherein the severity of harm is the harm to the patient should the failure occur, probability of occurrence is the likelihood of the failure actually occurring, and detectability is the ability of the process to detect the failure before it occurs. In other less formal risk assessment tools, we define risk as a function only of severity of harm and probability of occurrence. Early on in product development, when we are simply defining the critical quality attributes, we look only at the severity of harm should a failure occur. Any attribute wherein the severity of harm of a failure exceeds a predefined threshold, it is defined as critical. Often, the severity of harm becomes clear as we look into our literature and/or clinical trials. We then readjust specifications for the final commercial product. In the latter stages of process development, when assessing CPP, we are often tempted to reclassify very low-risk CPP as non-critical. This can lead to real issues later in commercial manufacturing when changes, controlled or otherwise, occur and we fail to investigate the impact of critical parameters because they were reclassified as non-critical due to the low level of risk identified at the time of development. Once the product design is fixed and severity is well understood, we in process development focus only on controlling risk, not criticality. This enables us to deliver a well-controlled process that will be robust in the face of change.